Hey everybody, I'm Casey Davidson, host of the Put 'em Back podcast. Before we jump into this month's episode, wanted to do a quick plug for a fishing tournament we're putting on. It's open to every angler in the state of South Carolina. It's for redfish, trout, and flounder, and it's a catch and release only tournament where you can measure your 3 longest fish and compete over an entire week. So it runs from September 3rd to the 13th, and 100% of the proceeds go to supporting conservation here in the state of South Carolina. So check out our first annual Put 'em Back fishing tournament, and we'll drop the link below. Hey, welcome again to the Put 'em Back podcast, your source for conservation. Today we are joined by Andrew Wunderley. He is the Charleston Waterkeeper, and I'm so stoked to have you on the show today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, so tell us about what is the Waterkeeper? What is the Charleston Waterkeeper?
Well, Charleston Waterkeeper's mission is to protect, restore, and defend the health and integrity of Charleston's waterways for people and for nature. And we do that through a really unique mix, and we can talk a lot about this. There's a lot to dive into here, but we do it through a unique mix of science, stewardship, and advocacy work. And so each of the projects and activities under those categories are really designed to, drive change for clean water.
So how did you become the Waterkeeper? I love it.
That's a big question.
The Waterkeeper. It's such a badass title.
Yeah. Well, thanks. It's a big question. I on a personal level, Waterkeeper brings together a lot of threads for me. My background is in science, biology major, but even more than that, I just growing up and to this day, I'm more comfortable outside. I love being on the water, around the water, like fishing, paddling, swimming, sailing, surfing, all those things that make living here in the Lowcountry so special, right? That's what it's really all about. And it's, the things that I like to pursue in my spare time. And, the thought of not being able to enjoy those activities because the water's too polluted is just not something I can bear. I can't sit idly by and not do anything about it. And so that's really the motivation for me personally. But, more than that, I think there's this notion of the public trust, right? Where, our creeks, rivers, marshes, the ocean, our beaches belong to the people of South Carolina, right? You have ownership interest in them the same way you do your private property, right? They're public rights and public resources, and we have a right to use and access them in a clean and unpolluted state. And those are the two driving factors for me, right? Is that notion of the public trust and our right to use and enjoy these resources for fishing and surfing and paddling and whatever else it is.
Right, but we really can't rely on other folks to do that work for us, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, hey, I'm going to make it my mission to make sure these things are protected.
Right.
I find that all the time as we do work that needs to be done and donate to different projects. And you can't just sit back, I think, as a consumer, as a, this everyday South Carolinian, just expect that the environment's going to stay nice, because there are factors, there are people out there polluting, and maybe they're doing it on purpose or not. There's got to be a watchdog in place, and we can't rely just on the federal and state governments to do this work because they're not on the ground, right?
Right. No, we get the level of environmental protection we advocate for as a community, pure and simple, right? The federal government, the state government are, subject to political winds and, influence from, all kinds of angles. And it's up to locals that use and enjoy the resources to stand up and speak for them. And that's, at its core, that's what Waterkeeper does, right? We're an advocate for local waterways and water quality. We speak for and on behalf of the harbor and, the Ashley River, the Cooper River, the Stono, the Wando. We are the voice for those waterways, and we stand up and speak. When something's wrong, we say it. When something needs to change, we try to make it change. And so that's the nut of what a Waterkeeper does, in essence, right, is that watchdog role.
Yeah, no doubt. I really wanted to dig in there because I think the primary thing that I see y'all out on the water doing every day, which I think is super valuable, and it's kind of hard to understand why it's valuable, being the watchdog, you guys are out there every day taking water samples from various sites across South Carolina, and it's that data, right, that gives you the power to actually advocate for change and fight for clean water. And tell us about what that entails to collect that data, and whether there's opportunities for our listeners to also engage in that activity, and what you're finding in the water.
I that's always a tough question because it's not always good. It's not always good. But, that part of that three-pronged approach, right, is science. And so, knowledge is power. We need to know what is out there, what the pollutants are in order to stop them at the source, right? And so that starts with science, good old-fashioned science. I think probably one of the things we're most known for is what we call our Swim Alert program. It's one of our water quality monitoring projects. And this time of year, May through October, we're out every Wednesday. We take samples at bacteria samples. We're sampling for fecal contamination, which is...
that sounds lovely.
It's exactly like what it sounds. It's exactly like what it sounds like. It's poop, right? Fecal contamination is coming from, it can be wildlife, it can be pet waste, it can be leaky sewer infrastructure, it can be septic tanks, it can be quite a few different, contributing sources. But we do that work every Wednesday, May through October, put the results out on Friday for the public when they're available so people can know when and where it's safe to go swimming, right? Baseline thing, how to protect you and your family a day on the water. Don't swim in water that has high degree of fecal contamination, swim in water that has low fecal contamination. Pretty straightforward, right? But behind the scenes, we take that data, and when we have enough data over usually we like to have about 3 years of data. We can then use that data as leverage to make things happen, right? So the saying in our office is that data drives action for clean water. And so when we have enough data, we can then go to the Department of Environmental Services and demand action, right? And make sure that the actions that need to take place in order to make those creeks and rivers safe for swimming again are happening. And so there's a whole process under state and federal law for that. And we're able to use the data to trigger those obligations in state law to require the cleanup work to happen. And so we're right here on James Island or Ellis Creek, depending on how old you are.
Which is right here. This is Ellis Creek
right behind
here.
us. Yeah. We've got probably 12 years worth of sampling data out of this creek, and it tests well sometimes, but a lot of times it doesn't. And so it's really important for folks to pay attention to the data, especially if they live along or recreate in James Island Creek. But the good news is that data served as the basis for a massive cleanup project. And I think one of the kind of flying under the radar components of that is there's about $10 million worth of infrastructure investment in the Clarks Point neighborhood that's going to get people off of septic tanks, connect them to sewer, and that'll make that portion of the creek a lot cleaner.
Just to talk about that. So y'all found that this particular creek had high levels of fecal containment or pollutants, and you took that data, went through the process, and then were able to get a $10 million cleanup fund for that. And the root cause for that was old leaking septic tanks was the primary cause, or is there multiple
things? It's a great question. So typically when there's high elevated levels of fecal bacteria, you can almost just stand up and look around, right? Well, what's going on in immediately adjacent to the site. And so in the instance, the lower portion of James Island Creek and in the upper portions as well, there's quite a bit of septic tanks, right? And usually in creeks with large numbers of septic tanks, what we see are persistently high levels of bacteria, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's incoming tide or outgoing tide, or whether it's raining or whether it's dry, bacteria levels consistently high. And that suggests a continuous source. That was the case here. We also were able to work with some of the other stakeholders to do what's called source tracking. And so we were able to identify in some of the samples human DNA, which means that some of the fecal matter was coming from human sources. And so that can only be sewers and septic tanks at that point. And so what had happened was there's big investment from the federal government in water and sewer spending, which was great. So we were able to capture some of that money through the South Carolina Rural Infrastructure Authority. We're also able to get some allocations. Our local elected delegation, Spencer Wetmore and Chip Campson, were really great about allocating some funds in the state budget to get those projects going. And so there's in total now about $8 million from the Rural Infrastructure Authority, but another $2 million from state budget allocations. And
Congrats.
there you
that's
go.
amazing. That's amazing, dude. So
and that's That work didn't happen.
That feels good.
It does, right? That's going to have long-lasting benefits for,
Yeah.
not only us, but, the next generation of
Right.
kids that is going to come along and want to fish and paddle and swim
Right.
in James Island Creek. There's a similar effort going on Shem Creek. We're hoping Philbin Creek's going to come online this year up in North Charleston. So it's taking that data and then turning that data into action and making sure
Yeah.
that it's pressing whatever button needs to get pressed in order to get the
Before
creek
we get off the poop topic, which is a good one to talk about. So you said one little nugget that I wanted to pull on because I think it is something actually actionable. This one's hard, right? Because like you're on an old septic system.
Mm-hmm.
It's expensive to change that over, what have you. But one thing you did mention is like your pet waste, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's one thing that I see pretty often. That's a pretty easy fix. Like.
Yeah.
When you're walking on the beach, this weekend I was out at Breach Inlet, and there was a bunch of dogs. Like no one's picking up after their dogs when they're out in the river.
Yeah.
That stuff's not supposed to be there. That's something actionable that our listeners could actually do. That's an easy one, right?
Oh man, super easy. Just pick up after your dog,
Right.
please. Like
Yeah.
nobody wants your dog crap all over the place. They really don't, right?
So that's a good
it's
one.
Stinky, it's gross,
All right,
and
let's
it's bad for the
let's
creek.
switch gears here though. So what other pollutants are you finding besides fecal matter?
Right.
With some examples of some other sources that are bringing pollutants into our,
Right.
our
Let
lovely
me-
harbor here.
Let me run back to a few different programs that we do. We do another thing we do is called Creek Watchers, where we do temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, clarity, and pH. And so we're finding some really interesting things there, right? Where we generally see a slight increase in temperature over the 10 years or so that we have data, and a slight decrease in pH, which is sort of interesting, right? And that's the overall in the whole system. And so, that's consistent with an estuary that's fixing more carbon out of the atmosphere, right? So some kind of climate-related signals so far, we don't have enough data to really bear that out. I mean, we need years and years worth of data, but just an interesting signal in some of that data to think about. The other work that we do that's, I think, really interesting is a microplastics monitoring project, right?
Wow, that's a big hot topic.
And
there's a ton of, conversation going on about
Right.
plastics, microplastics, that huge, Pacific garbage patch is now
Yeah.
the, bigger than the state of Texas.
macro and microplastics.
So we're
right?
experiencing
Yeah.
that same phenomenon here on the East Coast as well.
Oh yeah, Charleston's dirty secret is you look out at a scene like this and you've got Marsh and it looks pretty, but if you were to get down and muck around in that marsh, it's full of trash, right? And those macroplastics really quickly degrade and shed into microplastics. The Citadel's done a lot of good work on this, and really in little as 4 to 6 weeks, it's already shedding into microplastics.
Wow.
So we built a monitoring protocol to be able to test for that and quantify it. And in every single sample we've taken so far, over 2 years now, we found microplastics.
Dude, that's scary.
It's really scary.
Because we really haven't done enough research to know what that's doing to wildlife. So we just launched our new Elite Series carbon spinning combos, and we're so excited to take these to market. We've had some huge upgrades from our previous model. So the biggest complaint that we got with our previous Toadfish rods was they were a bit on the heavy side. So from a design perspective, I went in, completely redid everything. New reel seat, completely new reel. We reduced the rod weight by 30%. And so how we did that is on our grips, these are actually made with carbon fiber now instead of injection molded plastic. So we've got a carbon fiber butt. We've got a carbon fiber locking mechanism, rear locking, carbon fiber reel seat. So this is a huge upgrade. Again, 30% lighter than our previous model. We also, from a blank perspective, it's a 30-40 ton blend blank, and we actually did a carbon fiber wrapping on top of that you'll see, which just added a bit more strength and made our tapers a little bit faster, which was really exciting. From a reel perspective, we actually went with a carbon fiber rotor and a carbon fiber body. We kept the cool little soft touch inlays, which was exciting. Carbon fiber handle, sealed carbon fiber drag, same great smooth drag system. Just a completely rebuilt, lighter Carbon Elite Series from Toadfish. So check it out. It's available this July.
Right.
Birds are ingesting it. It's in fish. Then
Right.
we eat the fish.
What's really scary about microplastics research, right, is there's been work to quantify what's out there, right? Which is part of what we're adding to the
Right.
story. We have a locally focused set of sites, and we're quantifying, what types of microplastics are here in the Charleston Harbor estuary. But where the big research projects are going is looking at how microplastics are impacting,
The food chain.
well, not only the health of wildlife, but also human health,
Right.
right? And that's
That's what I'm saying.
really
Like,
scary.
We're ingesting, fish that have then
Yeah.
ingested
Yeah.
other animals that have microplastics, and then how
Right.
is that impacting us?
This gets into really, so a known property of plastics in the marine and estuarine environment is that they soak up other contaminants in the water column, right? So other chemicals or pollutants that are out there will actually absorb into the microplastic over time. And so they actually become more and more toxic over time.
Is there any another actionable example where your
Yeah.
microplastics testing has yielded some type of result, like you had with the funding you got for the septic tank cleanup?
Right. This is a really a first of its kind project for the Charleston area, and so we're just building the foundational data set to be able to do that advocacy work. What I would love to see down the road, there's currently no state water quality standards for microplastics, which means that you could freely, let's just say you had a big factory and part of your pollution discharge was microplastics, there would be no controls on how much you could discharge.
Wow.
Right. And so wherever these things are coming from, we want to work backwards and get to the point source and stop it at wherever it's being discharged, right? Stop the problem at the source is the way we like to work. And so we're building the data set to be able to track it. I mean, we're finding...
Wasn't there a thing a few years ago, though, where you guys were finding some pellets, like
Little
up
pellets,
on the beaches
yeah.
or something in Sullivan's that I read about?
Nurdles or plastic pellets, right?
Yeah.
They're the anything made out of plastic starts as a pellet, right? And so we get a little slice of the global plastic pollution or global plastic production cycle here in Charleston. And these pellets start life in the Marcellus shale fields in Pennsylvania. And so ethane is a byproduct of fracking natural gas. That gas gets sent down to the Houston, Texas area, where it's cracked into ethylene, and then other chemicals are added, and then it's extruded into a pellet, right? Now, let's just say I'm making food packaging, and I want a clear container that resists UV and is slightly flexible and can hinge or whatever. I order my pellets, my Nurdles, from a manufacturer who adds chemicals to give them that property, right? And then I take shipments of them, melt them down into, in molds and melt them down and make my end product and sell it. I mean, it's really kind of a fascinating, production
Process,
chain,
yeah.
right?
I didn't know the supply chain on that. That's interesting.
And it's what's really interesting is the plastic industry as a whole for making virgin plastic is just booming, right? It's very expensive to make new things out of recycled plastic, but it's much cheaper to do it out of virgin plastic, right? And so, the Port of Houston is backed up. They can't ship these pellets through the Port of Houston because it's so backed up. So they come up here to the Port of Charleston, right? And they go through a process called transloading where they come in on train cars. They use these pneumatic vacuum machines, and they suck the Nurdles out of the train cars, package them into bags, put them into pallets, and then those pallets get stuffed into shipping containers. Those shipping containers go to the ports, get stacked on ships, and go all over the world. So the problem with that process is during every step of the way, the train cars, the unloading, the packaging, the trucking, the container ships, the port terminals, every step of the way they spill, they leak out. And when they leak, rain, floods, boom, they're in the water. And, almost every single site that we sample for pellets, we find them. I mean, we found them all the way up on Capers Island, all the way down on Edisto Beach. We found them all the way up the Cooper River to the lakes. The one river that seems to avoid it is the Ashley River, believe it or not. The Ashley River has the lowest densities out of the four of them, which is really interesting. But the Cooper River seems to be a hotspot for this. A lot of industrial activity. A lot of the packagers are located in the Cooper River's watershed, the transloaders. So, we were able to pin a big part of that problem on a company that was operating on Union Pier. And they were operating in a way that just was completely
negligent.
That's negligence, a legal term, and it's, they were operating in a way that just was disrespectful to our surrounding environment here in Charleston, right? Like, we're not here to say don't come to our community and don't do business in our community,
yeah, just do
right?
it in a responsible way.
We're here to say, like, you want to come and do business in our community, you need to do it in a way that respects our waterways, our estuary, and our natural environment. And so, as long as you're willing to be a good community steward, you're welcome to come here. If not, and you're going to spill your pellets all over the place, you're going to hear from us. And so we were able to, collect the data. What we found is that when we sampled, the closer and closer we got to this facility, the higher the densities of pellets were. And so the evidence was really irrefutable that, they were a big part of the problem. And we were able to, we used the Federal Clean Water Act and the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, and we were represented by our friends at the Southern Environmental Law Center.
Great, yeah, that's a great organization.
Great, awesome organization. Well. We're lucky to have them here in town.
Yeah.
But that work resulted in a $1.2 million settlement for clean water, and about $1 million of that, what didn't go to attorney's fees, $1 million of that went to the Coastal Community Foundation, and now supports projects that benefit the health of
that's fantastic.
The harbor.
Yeah, that's awesome. It just goes back to that data and the fact that you guys are out there, and thank you so much for being the watchdog and just committing your life to this. It's amazing. Going back to the Marsh and how I got introduced personally to the Waterkeepers, which if you guys are a part of Waterkeepers, or I really encourage you guys to join, and there's a great volunteer opportunities. My daughter is super interested in conservation and the environment, and I took her to a marsh cleanup with the Charleston Waterkeepers. We got on our mud boots, got down at this public park, and it was unbelievable the amount of garbage. As a group, I think we had maybe 20 volunteers at the event I was at, and we filled up an entire pickup truck bed, like a full-size pickup truck bed full of garbage that came out of the marsh, just in like probably a 300-yard area. We found crazy things, toasters, old baby dolls, like you name it, it was there. And it kind of was like, it took me aback a little bit. I'm like, geez, like, we are just not taking care of our public spaces. And it was really impactful for my daughter as well to see that. And so now, like, whenever we go out places, she wants to do a marsh cleanup. We'll go out on high tide and look in the marsh and try to get balloons, or we'll be offshore, and like, how many balloons are we going to get today? And
the balloons offshore are ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, but we've made it into kind of a game. Like, we have our fishing story, but it's also like, look at this garbage that we collected, which is like fun, but also sad,
Casey,
right? You know what I mean? But I think where I was going with this and being long-witted is like, y'all providing that opportunity to introduce us to this is so powerful. And I would encourage everyone to volunteer for these marsh cleanups. I mean, it was incredible.
Right, that little spark of conservation is exactly why we do that. Right, that is exactly why that volunteer work is so important. I mean, look, it's got great conservation benefits. You're removing material out of the marsh. It's restoring habitat. All those things are super positive, right? But it's that spark of conservation in that next generation that really, really drives change, right? If you can build a community of water stewards like that, if everybody gets it, you're stopping the problem again at the source, right? The stuff would never end up in there in the first place. You never need to do a cleanup. Like, that would be ideal, right? And so, sparking that little flame of stewardship in the next generation is just, it's so powerful. And all of our events at Waterkeeper are family friendly, right? We encourage folks to bring the family, bring the kids, bring the neighborhood kids. We frequently have all ages. We've got like retired folks to little kids that, are basically mom and dad, helping a 4 or 5 year old sometimes do some of these cleanups. It's just that part of like being good stewards, taking care of your community. That kind of stewardship ethic as a community is really what's going to sustain us.
Oh, 100%. So besides the marsh cleanups, is there any other volunteer opportunities that the community can participate with the Waterkeepers?
Right. We've got lots of different volunteer opportunities. Marsh cleanups are just one of them. On the higher end, we can train you up to be a creek watcher, and you can, take water quality samples for us. We can train you up to do the microplastic sampling. You can do that work with us. We can even train you out to help with the bacteria testing work, and you get to ride around in the boat with me a lot. So it's always fun. But I think one of the things I'm most proud of is, we have a long-standing, deep relationship with the Department of South Carolina Department of Natural Resources SCORE program, which I know you all are super supportive of too. I think they're the hardest working folks in conservation. I think it's a spectacular
100%.
program. Probably about 10 years ago, realized that they had all the permitting in place, they had all the expertise, they had all the equipment. They just needed big groups of volunteers on a regular basis. And that's what we were able to help provide. And so we do all kinds of activities. We probably do 70 events with them every year, which is just,
wow.
Looking back on it, it's always like surprising. I can't believe we've done that many right at the end of the year.
Yeah, so where can we find out about these events?
You go to charlestonwaterkeeper.org/volunteer, and whatever's on the schedule will be there. It's a constantly evolving list. And so if there's not something there that fits your schedule, you just go back a couple of weeks and check again, and there's always going to be something new.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely provide those links as well on this podcast as well as our Instagram and stuff too.
It can be anything from collecting Spartina seeds to, transplanting, Spartina grass to marsh plantings to oyster reef builds to marsh cleanups to, come and get trained at a water quality testing event. There's a revolving group of activities that are designed to get that spark going for folks, right? Just like for your daughter.
Yeah, no doubt. So, I think we've covered a few actionable things, which is cool. Like, obviously, the first one, clean up after your dog. We talked about poop. The other one is clean up after yourself. Marsh cleanups, you see trash. I was down setting a minnow trap yesterday, saw a bunch of old little shrimp buckets. And scoop those, the little bait, plastic bait buckets. Scoop your balloons offshore, all those things. One more actual thing that I wanted to talk about that I don't know if you find in the water, but, I've always been told if you live on the water, you have to be even a more incredible steward, right? And the reason that folks move to the South Carolina coast is to live on the water.
Yeah.
If you have that privilege, what are some things you can do, right? Like if you have a lawn, you're fertilizing it, things like this. Like what are some things that we need to be extra conscious of that you're finding from your testing that is also running into the water with a big rain or flood? So
let me tie this back to a partner testing project we have. About 4 or 5 years ago, we started working with NOAA's coastal. Hold on a second. We started working with NOAA's coastal science center here at Fort Johnson, their ecotoxicology division, and we talked a little bit about plastics, and they soak up other contaminants in the column, right? We talked a little bit about plastics and their ability to soak up other contaminants in the water column. Silicone is really good at it, right? And, we all know those silicone wristbands, like Lance Armstrong, Livestrong, or whatever. They're fractions, bought in bulk. They're fractions of a cent, to purchase. But what we do with NOAA is we go out seasonally. So each season, summer, spring, fall, and winter, and we install these, they're called passive sampler bands. We install them at about 20 different sites all around the harbor. And they sit out for about a month. They soak up whatever's there. And then we retrieve them. And then they go over to the lab at NOAA where they get, the contaminants get extracted and then quantified. Right, so they measure how much and what particular contaminants are in them. So we're doing fipronils and pyrethroids, which are
talking science, like way too science for this be for redneck over here.
Fipronils and pyrethroids are two different types of pesticides. PAHs, which is just hydrocarbons, and PFASs, right, which are the forever chemicals that you hear a lot about. They're in drinking water.
Like the cast iron skillets or whatever?
Not cast iron, but the nonstick.
The nonsticks.
Yeah, so that's a form of PFAS.
But pesticides, you're finding pesticides in the water.
We're finding all of it, frankly. The interesting thing about pesticides, right, is that whatever's available at the big box stores seasonally is what you find in the water, right? So that suggests that connection between human use of the chemical and what we're finding in the water. So based on what bugs are hatching, the different formulations of stuff will be present at the big box stores, and that's what you'll find in the water. So what's
something actionable there? You're not going to keep people from spraying for mosquitoes, but maybe check the weather before you do, right?
Well,
maybe spray
bingo.
on and then give it 2-3 days to dry, or at least before you anticipate a big rain. Like, just be conscious of
the most
that,
important thing you can do is read the label on the whether it's a fertilizer, a herbicide, or a pesticide, or whatever it is that you're using, right? Read the label. And, a lot of times we're like, okay, well,
The stuff people hate reading.
sometimes it can be difficult at small print, right? Yeah. But, the point is like you need to use enough of the chemical to get the result you want. Any more doubling the dose is not going to make the bug deader, right? Once it's dead, it's dead, right? You've used enough.
I mean, these are common sense things, but and we laugh about them, but like, obviously we're not doing this because you're finding pesticides.
So this is where it gets back. That little spark of conservation and stewardship, that's why you need that, right? Because that's going to make you take the extra step, right? That's going to make you go, wait a minute, what is this stuff?
Let me read the
using?
label.
Is it going to get in the water?
Let me look at the weather.
Use it in a responsible way, right? And so, even before we get there, though, there are alternatives like, especially with pests, like habitat control and food source control probably gets rid of 85% of your bug problem without ever spraying any kind of chemical.
Yeah, what are
right?
some of those ideas?
I mean, the classic one is mosquitoes. You just don't allow standing water on your property, right? Or ants, right? Ants are only in your house because they're after a food source, right? And if you're able to control the food source, the ants will just go away on their own, right? They're not going to waste time if they don't have a food source. So, little things like that, habitat and food source control can really do a lot. There are some kind of forward-thinking pest companies too that start with habitat control before they'll even spray, which is sort of interesting. Kind of a new.
Yeah, we did this fun thing. We do a big like raised bed garden at my house, and we did a fun thing where we would raise different things like bugs to release that would control other bugs.
Oh, fun!
You know,
I mean,
really
that's
fun.
habitat
and
control.
And it was fun because the kids could watch them hatch and then release them and.
Ladybugs are apparently murderous. If you have little ladybugs in your garden, that's a really great sign because they'll take out all the other all the other bad pests.
Yeah, I think we did praying mantises or something like that.
They're another good one,
which was really cool. Yeah.
That's fun stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, that same thing would go with herbicides. Same thing would go with fertilizers. Fertilizers are especially bad. We fortunately haven't seen. It's one of the things we haven't seen.
So why are fertilizers so bad? Just high level. I think I know, but
nutrient loading, right? And so when you have too much nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen in the water, and you can have algal blooms. Is a lot of what you see down in Florida with Lake Okeechobee.
100%. Yeah,
right?
I thought you were going to go there, but I mean that's a huge one. Y'all have probably heard about this. But when you release all these fertilizers into the water, it's fertilizing all of the algae in the water as well, and that's why we're seeing these massive red tides in Florida and these huge fish kills. But a lot of it could just be as simple as, hey, if you're going to fertilize your grass and you live on the water, like don't do it before you have a massive rain, or use it in moderation, or choose an alternative, a more natural alternative, because it has huge ecosystem-wide consequences.
Another really simple thing too that I think folks don't think about a lot are buffers, right? Especially if you border a creek or you border marsh or the harbor or something like that. Having a buffer between your lawn and your landscaped area and the marsh is hugely helpful. And like,
so just like a big bed, like some.
If you can do native species in there, like the typical like the sea oxeye and the ground cell, and like all the other kind of natural species that are in that marsh fringe. If you can keep those natural buffers in place for, even as small as 20 feet, but up to 50 feet. If you can get 50 feet of buffer, like that's just fantastic. And all of that sheet flow runoff gets filtered through that natural buffer before it even makes it in the creek or the marsh. I mean, that's a lot of communities. Mount Pleasant has some really good buffer ordinances that require those buffers in certain distances and certain widths, in various scenarios. But those buffers are fantastic. They would eat up all those nutrients before they ever ended up in the creek in the first place.
No doubt. I think that's the spark for me that I'd like to see everyone understand, and it's simple, right? Like just that idea that everything flows downstream.
Yeah.
So no matter where you live in the state of South Carolina, or if you're in Florida or wherever you're at, what you're putting out in your lawn, what you're putting in the environment, your trash, the things that you're doing, you see those covers, right? Those manhole covers. What do they have on them? I think it's a striped bass, weirdly, in South Carolina, but all that water.
It drains the river.
That comes from the city. Yeah. No matter if you're walking down the city of Charleston and you see some trash there, it's going to go in a vent, and that water is going to drain somewhere, and it drains right here in the Charleston Harbor. And then you end up in this situation where you have all this trash. We talked about plastics, fertilizer, pesticides, oil, even that, being conscious of when you're filling up your boat at the marina and have a pad out, all these things, all this stuff goes in the environment, right? Yeah. And it's having these consequences across the board. We're finding plastics and fish and birds, and we have sick dolphins that I've read about in the Post and Courier a few years back. All these factors are leading into it, and it's our fault. Yeah. And I think just that consciousness, that realization that everything that I'm doing in my life, I need to be conscious that what I'm putting out there is inevitably going to end up back in the waterway.
Right.
That's the spark for me that needs to happen.
Bingo, right? And it is, we live in the Lowcountry, right? We've got 1 foot in the water and 1 foot on land at all time. Like that intricate relationship between what happens on land and the water is so critical here. And you can't do something on land without impacting what's happening in water, right? And so, whether we're talking about impervious surface cover or drainage infrastructure, or, applications of pesticides and herbicides, or sewer overflows or whatever it is, you're exactly right. It all drains into the nearest creek or river, oftentimes without any treatment whatsoever. That's a big eye opener for folks when they realize that the flood water that they see on the ground doesn't go somewhere to be treated, right?
100%.
It drains into the nearest creek.
And think about Columbia or Upstate. I mean, this is obviously a microcosm because we're talking about South Carolina because we're here and we're talking about Waterkeeper here. But, everything from any major city that's upstream, you have a chicken plant in Columbia, or you have this or that, and all that water goes into the Congaree River, flows into our lake system, Lake Mary, and all that goes through the lock and ends up in the Cooper River. Right. So anything that is being put out in the environment across that entire huge river system, probably even from there, from Lake Murray all the way up to Greenwood Dam, flowing from Murray back into the Saluda, back into the Congaree, and so on and so forth. Whatever that water quality is there impacts the water quality in the Cooper, and it ends up here in the Charleston Harbor. And we're like, I wonder why we have sick dolphins. I wonder, these are things that we can control. And I think I don't want to paint like a huge negative picture, because there is some things we can do. And I think it's just being conscious of what we're putting in the water. I think that's huge.
It's all connected. It's all connected, right? So what you do one place impacts what's going on. It's not just the four corners of your property, right? What you do there impacts your neighbor, impacts the neighborhood creek. What they do in Columbia, what they do in Greenville. It all ends up down here at some point. And so, working with your neighbor, working together as a community, building that stewardship ethic, that spark we keep talking about, is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical if we're going to be a safe, resilient, healthy community for years to come.
Awesome. Well, I think we can be. I would just ask again that everyone reach out to the Charleston Waterkeeper, volunteer your time, get your kids involved. It's actually fun. It doesn't sound glamorous, but get down in the marsh, getting muddy with your kids and picking up trash, getting out on the boat with Andrew and his team, testing the water, for them to use that data again to make change and to force bad actors to do what they're supposed to do and be stewards of the environment, just like we all should be. So that's going to wrap it up for this month's podcast of the Put 'em Back podcast, sponsored by the Toadfish Conservation Coalition. Thank you so much, Andrew, for being a part of this, and thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, appreciate so much what y'all do, and congratulations on all your accomplishments.
Let's get on the water together sometime.
Yeah, let's go fishing for sure.
Remind them what it's all about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.